Well, welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. Well, today we have one of the top journalists in the country with us, and I'm really honored to have Colin Flaherty with us. He is a WorldNet Daily reporter and the author of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, White Girls Bleed a Lot, The Return of Racial Violence and How the Media Ignores It. He's an award-winning journalist whose work really has been published in over 1,000 sites around the world, including the New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, and others. And he has a recent article with WorldNet Daily talking about racial violence in the United States. Colin, nice to have you with us, my friend.
It is an honor to be here.
Listen, this subject is really something, and can we just kind of sum it up and say that racial violence is on the rise again in the United States?
This book is about an epidemic of black mob violence all over the country, cities big and small, all over the country.
Wow. Most recently, you talk about the man who's, I guess, still in a coma after being mobbed by 50 blacks. Is that true?
Yeah, it's in St. Paul, Minnesota. Now, here's a question for you and for your listeners, really.
All right.
Did anybody know that St. Paul and Minneapolis are centers of racial violence and sites of frequent and intense racial conflict?
Haven't heard a word.
I didn't know until I started doing the book.
Wow.
Dozens and dozens of examples in the Twin Cities. I was on the air at CBS affiliate in Minneapolis a few months ago, and the host was very polite. After 10 minutes, he pretty much said, Colin, I don't really buy that this stuff exists, even though I documented it, the time, place, date, story all the time that it did. For the next 90 minutes, callers to his radio show told them their personal experience, black mob violence in Minneapolis. After 90 minutes, he put the flag up and said, okay, I guess something's going on here.
Wow. Why is the media ignoring this?
I think that question is a little bit above my pay grade, but all my book does is say it is happening. And so I purposely did not do causes or solutions or overarching theories. I just said, listen, this racial violence is happening. And so the book's about two things. It's about how it happens and how it's misreported. And so why they misreport it, your guess is as good as mine, except the fact that everybody just gets freaked out talking about race in this country.
Well, we're hearing about it, and some of the statistics, Colin, that we're getting out of Chicago is staggering, and yet it may make some news for a day, but it has no legs as far as being continuous.
Chicago is ground zero for two things, for racial violence and for official denial of it. I mean, there was a case just not too long ago where on Memorial Day, they closed a place called the North City Beach in Chicago. And they said, why are you closing that beach? Well, it's too hot out. And they didn't close any other beaches. The next day, everybody started calling into the talk radio station. They said, I know why they closed that beach. There were 1,000 black people on the beach, beating people up, stealing bicycles, harming people, destroying property. And that's why that beach was closed. And the police chief came out and said, we're not aware of that. Then a local radio station started playing the 911 calls, the panicked calls. Oh. When you call 911, you're not being politically correct and saying, there's teenagers there. No, you're saying what is actually happening and how your life is in danger. So that's the nice thing about today is because of YouTube and videos and talk radio and shows like yours, the truth, we can tell the truth.
I'm just still staggered because when we saw the Zimmerman-Martin case, we realized that there not only is a bias, but there's actually a movement. And it left us somewhat stunned. And, of course, your book deals with this. But have you, in your writing and research for this, did you discover actual lies by the media?
Well, I think the biggest they lie by omission. The biggest lie, of course, is I think the one I just told you where the police chief lied and the media kind of went along with it. The biggest lie is not reporting the extent and intensity of this racial violence. No one is saying that every crime we have to stick a racial badge on the perpetrator and talk about that. But at some point, every town should be a couple stories saying, listen, we've got a pattern here. This part of town is dangerous. That part of town is dangerous. And why can't we talk about that?
Well, do you have any idea why this is happening?
No, again, when I set out to write a book, I said, I'm writing a book for the people who deny it is happening. I mean, I've met with so many reporters. I was a reporter myself for a long time, still am. And I would show them these videos, and they would look at me and say, Colin, race has nothing to do with that. And here's the thing. We live in the most race-conscious country in the world.
Right.
Every day we pick up the paper and read about the Black Caucus, Black colleges, Black labor unions. Many of these stories are written by members of the National Association of Black Journalists. But you have 1,000 black people running down the streets of Philadelphia, pulling people out of cars, beating people up, going into restaurants, stealing stuff, destroying property. I go to the same reporters and I said, what's up with all that violence, that black violence? And they look at me and they say, Colin, we're colorblind.
All right. So it would appear to me that the lack of truth in the covering of these racial violence could in itself, in time, spar a huge racial pushback.
I know this. I know that an enormous number of people are taking their own self-defense a lot more seriously because a lot of people do know that this is happening.
Yeah.
A lot of people are arming themselves, and if you want to call that a pushback, well, I see a lot of pushback.
Is it geographic, Colin? Are you seeing it just in certain areas of the country, or is it all over?
The only geographic thing, geographic, there's a couple pockets where it's not happening, but if I mention them, I'll jinx them and it'll happen tomorrow. But it's happening in the small towns now. Peoria, Illinois, Springfield, Missouri, Greensboro, North Carolina. I mean, Greensboro, North Carolina, that's Andy of Mayberry country.
Right.
Last year they had a dozen examples of hundreds and hundreds, more than 1,000 people on the 4th of July on the streets of downtown Greensboro, destroying property on video, beating people up. 1,000 people, black people. It started happening again this year. They had an emergency meeting of the city council. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Let's have a curfew. They draw a little circle around the downtown, put a curfew on it.
Yeah.
That didn't help. They had another big explosion of violence on the 4th of July. Then they had another thing in Greensboro a couple weeks ago, just 2 blocks outside of the curfew zone. Hundreds and hundreds of black people fighting, destroying property. Hundreds of police officers trying to quell it. Quite serious stuff. I realize there's some one-on-one, but mainly what I'm hearing you say is mob violence, maybe even flash mob violence. I focus on the mob violence, and mostly because I think it's kind of a new thing. I don't call them flash mobs either. Okay. The reason why is the reporters they try to make up names for things so they can avoid calling it what it really is, black mob violence. So they'll say it's a flash mob, and they'll say it's unruly teenagers. In Chicago, they had a couple hundred kids running down the streets of the Magnificent Mile, beating people up, shoving people out of the way, destroying property. The newspapers called it, and TV said they were mischievous teens.
Wow. We watched most recently the violence on a bus. It was nationwide. You saw it. The teenagers that went after the one. There were 3 black kids, I think, that went after the one white kid. And they beat him up pretty good on the bus. The whole thing was on film. And then the bus driver finally pulls over and only yells at the kids. Didn't actually try to stop it. He just yells at them. So, but there was a case where it actually got some exposure.
It did, and the picture really told the story there. But here's what people didn't really pick up on from that video. He was the only white kid on the bus, and the other kids on the bus were screaming and yelling encouragement. Wow. And so it was really a lot worse than it looked.
Wow. Okay, where can people get your book, Colin?
Easy to find at Amazon. WND is putting out a new edition in October, where it's going to feature little things called QR codes. So as you're reading along the paperback version, you take your smartphone out, scan this QR code, and you'll be seeing a video of the riot and violence I'm describing in the book.
It's called White Girls Bleed a Lot, The Return of Racial Violence and How the Media Ignore It. And that is, again, put out by WorldNet Daily. Check it out at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Thank you, my friend. Keep up the good work, and thanks for all your reporting. You do a great job.
It is an honor to be here.
Thank you, sir. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Do you have a Bible? And there are some people in the world that don't. And one of the great organizations that has served this need around the world is the American Bible Society. And I'm honored to have had the opportunity to talk to Doug Birdsall. He is the president of the American Bible Society, and he shares with us some very interesting trends in the United States about Bibles and public school. Join me now as we talk to Doug. Well, today I'm really quite honored to have with us Doug Birdsall. He's the president of the American Bible Society, and I've looked forward to talking to Doug for quite some time. And Doug, welcome to the program today.
Thank you, Barry. It's nice to be with you.
The work you do is just terrific, and I want to say thank you for the long hours you and your team put in. And but today we see some interesting numbers that 2/3 of Americans want Bibles back in the public schools. How refreshing.
It is interesting, isn't it? This is actually comes to us through a study that American Bible Society does in partnership with the Barna Research Group. And there is a growing sense of awareness that we are in moral decline. And about 2/3 of the people in our country really do sense that the best source of hope for reversing these trends is greater awareness of, respect for, engagement with the Bible.
So what do Americans see in the Bible as a role in public school?
This is interesting, Perry. This can be looked at many ways. And of course, we know that there are very intense debates about the place of religion, the place of the Bible in public schools. The findings have indicated, as you just mentioned, that about 70% of people across the country would like to see a greater emphasis, a greater awareness of, and instruction from the Bible in public schools. I think that there are probably 2 or 3 ways that I would interpret this. First of all, people see a moral decline, so they're looking for answers.
Right.
I think that there's many people in this country who realize that the foundations for the things that we value most in our society, the dignity of the individual, freedom, land rights, voting rights, these kinds of things, is the writers of our Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. There was an acknowledgement these come to us from our Creator. There's a sense of the natural created order. So I think people are looking for moral guidance. I think people also want people simply to be aware of a book that has been the most influential book in Western civilization, for people to be aware of that so that they're literate about our society. And I think people are also looking for a sense of connectedness to a community of people across the country where there might be some shared values. I think it would be up to local educators, people who make decisions about how the Bible might be taught. It's interesting that many universities offer courses that deal with the Bible in American public life, the Bible in American experience. We're simply reporting what we have seen, that a vast majority of people in the country would like to see some emphasis on the Bible in our education system.
Isn't it somewhat, Doug, an admittance of a higher moral law and in recognizing the need for the Bible to be in public school, or does it open the door for other religious books to be taught on equal basis?
I think probably both. And I think that in a pluralistic society, it's actually not a bad idea at all for people of Christian faith to be aware of other religions, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism. I think simply to understand something about them, their history. When I was a graduate student at Harvard University, I studied Buddhism. That was largely because of the fact that I was a minister working in Asia, but I needed to understand that faith system, its literature, its history, its impact. There should be no fear of people being aware of other religious systems. I think that there is obviously a delicate problem when a teacher might be trying to teach a subject as an advocate, trying to proselytize students. That does not need to be a concern of ours. In terms of, I mean, I should say that should be a concern of ours. But I think if people are teaching a religious system so that people can understand it, that probably is helpful. I think that if people are given exposure to the Bible, if they're allowed to read it, I think many people will discover, they will begin to make the connections. Now I see where this comes from, this value in our society. The idea of giving people a second chance, that is a distinctly Christian concept.
Because you're basically saying the Bible can defend itself among these other literatures.
Absolutely. Spurgeon, the great Baptist minister in London, said, I would rather defend lions than have to defend the Bible. It's so powerful it can speak for itself.
So is there a trend now? Are certain states allowing this back into public schools, and are others to follow suit?
There's no evidence to support that, Perry, that we are seeing in any trends. I think increasingly we are seeing people discuss this, and you have picked up on this story as a story for the public square.
Right.
I think people were astounded earlier this year when the Bible miniseries developed by Mark Burnett was viewed by over 100 million people. A phenomenal success. How do you explain that? I don't know that anybody has satisfactorily, but obviously something that Mark was advised not to do because there was seemingly no market for it. Nearly a third of the people in our country watched at least a portion of that. So I think people realize that in a society that is becoming increasingly tolerant, that's not all bad. But to the point when people cannot make a moral judgment about anything, then that means we simply have no point of reference, because the Bible does provide a moral framework for individuals, for families, for communities, for making good judgments that serve the common good.
During your survey, when you discovered this 70% plus that wants Bible back in the public schools, was anything else in that survey that may have stood out to you?
Well, yes, thank you for asking, Perry. What we discovered is that whereas 70% of the respondents to that survey, who also indicated that there was a sense of moral decline, felt that the best response to that was the Bible. Two things that concern us. One is the number of Christians who respect the Bible, who read it rarely. And so we're really wanting to work with churches across the country to encourage them to make the Bible more central to their life, whether it be small group Bible studies, Sunday school classes, catechism, Sunday morning worship where the Bible is read and preached. It's really imperative that if we have any desire for the Bible to be effective in our wider culture, that it has to be central to our life as those who love Jesus Christ and who love His Word. A second thing that really came out to us was, and is a matter of concern to us, is that the large number of people who are younger in our country, particularly those under the age of 30, who almost never read the Bible. I think that something like 80% of that generation under 30 rarely, if ever, read the Bible. That really is a concern to us.
That's an incredible discovery. And you're wondering, with modern technology, which we're trying to do here, we're trying to be on every digital platform with God's Word, if that is the means to get it into the younger generation.
Very good question and very good point. I'm glad that you raised that. Just 2 weeks ago, here in New York City, on the front page of the New York Times, there was a story about YouVersion, citing the fact that it has been downloaded over 100 million times. And they suggested what a huge success, what a phenomena that is. And so that's really the encouraging side of the story, because it may be that there are people who are accessing Scripture, whether it's a verse at a time, a chapter at a time, a concept at a time, a whole book at a time, who perhaps are getting access to the Bible through digital platforms. And so I commend you for what you're doing. It would encourage you to make the Bible central to your work and to your message.
It certainly is. There's no question about that. We just launched on Roku not even a week ago, and we went from channel 223 in the religious and spiritual column all the way to 21 in 6 days. So there's a hunger for God's Word, and I think the digital platform is just another tool God's dropped into our hand to win those young people. Well, Doug, you're a delight. American Bible Society, where can people communicate with you and learn more about it?
The easiest way, obviously, is on the web to go to americanbible.org. Very simple, americanbible.org. And they can learn all about what we do, how they can be involved, learn something of our vision for the next generation, which really is the driving passion. We are committed to working together with churches, with colleges and seminaries, with publishing organizations, with youth organizations, to get the Bible into the hands and the minds and the hearts of every person in the country under the age of 28. We believe that will really have a redemptive, renewing impact upon our churches and upon our society.
Wonderful. Thank you, my friend. It's a delight, and we'll have you back soon.
I'll look forward to that. Thank you, Perry.
Well, he is one champion, doing a great job, and we're going to have another one on here in just a few moments. I am excited to have back with us Bradlee Dean, and he has got a message for us. Buckle your seatbelt. You're in for a real ride coming up in just a few moments.
Hi, I'm Daniel, and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market. But at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Well, I love this guy. Bradlee Dean, he's been with us on several occasions, and he's back with us today. He's an ordained minister, a syndicated columnist. He's a drummer. He's a syndicated talk show host of the program called Sons of Liberty. He goes on campus, and he holds rallies for young people and gets them inspired about the Constitution and God and Christian government. But today, well, hold on. This is going to be a whole new level today, because he's going to take it up a couple of notches. Hi, Bradlee. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Perry.
Yeah, good to see you. Well, listen, you put out a clarion call to abolish the Department of Education, and you're citing the 10th Amendment. All right, this is a bold move, and I know others have talked about this. What brought you to this point?
Well, again, knowing that we've done 342 high schools in 22 different states and seeing the kids that are being subjected to everything and protected from nothing, I'm just kind of curious to know that the 86%, or from the 86% that send their kids into public schools, which are Christians, patriots, and or conservatives, why is it that they're complaining about what the federal government is doing when in fact that they don't have the lawful right to do it in the first place? So the answer to America's dilemma concerning what's going on in public schools is the fact that we just pull them out of public schools. It's that simple. I shared with you last time, Perry, that William Bennett, Secretary of Education under Ronald Reagan, he was the guy that said, in essence, that the longer students stay in public schools, the dumber they get. And he was exactly right, because if you see the fruit of that, you can see that over 700,000 students every year in this country that graduate high school can't even read their diplomas. So here we are.
All right. Let me just say on the outset, this is obviously very controversial. And every time I take on the subject of education, boy, oh boy, do I hear it. And there are some good administrators and teachers trying to do their best, but the system doesn't allow them to do their best. Is that do you see that as a possibility?
Almost every time I'm doing a high school assembly and I'm talking about No Child Left Behind, International Baccalaureate, now something called Common Core, which is nothing but confusion, right, where they're trying to level the playing field or shoot for the floor rather than the stars, I see the teachers in the back nodding along with me. And in other words, they're agreeing with what I'm saying. They're just needing someone to say it for them. And what they need to do is they need to rally around those that are willing to stand up for not only the fact that we have the law on our side, but also to be willing to go forward and to speak out to put a stop to what's going on in public schools. Folks, this is illegal doctrine. This is a UN global agenda. For example, if I talk about International Baccalaureate. That was started in 1968 as a UN global scheme. It's un-American, and if I can just kind of highlight some of the topics, Perry, they're teaching earth worship, they're teaching evolution, they're teaching socialized medicine, world government, animal rights, animals seen as brothers and sisters, redistribution of American wealth to third world nations, contraception, in other words, reproductive health, legalizing an illegal act called abortion, debt forgiveness to third world nations, adoption of the gay rights agenda, and elimination of the right to bear arms, and even setting aside massive amounts of private land where no human presence is allowed. What? That is un-American. It is unconstitutional. And as you said at the get-go from the beginning of the show here, Amendment 10, Article 10 of the Bill of Rights said the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. They don't have the right to break the law. So why are they in public schools in the first place?
All right. I know that Ronald Reagan, this was a hot issue with him. He looked at abolishing the Department of Education. So in essence, what you're saying here, Bradlee, is that the National Department of Education really has no right dictating to the state what to do.
No, absolutely not. I mean, by the way, when you look at the NEA, I mean, if you want me to go into the background of the NEA just a little bit, you don't need to go too far to see how corrupt and perverted they are. I mean, the NEA has a homosexual caucus. Now, that wasn't good enough. Now they have something called a drag queen caucus. Do I say anything else, or do I need to say anything else? Because that's how perverted. There's no base, there's no law, there's no common sense involved with the NEA here, my friends.
But that is the organization that keeps a good teacher from being complete in their expression. I shouldn't say in their expression, in their desire to be good educators. It's the NEA that comes in over the top of them and squelches them.
Of course, and that's where the unions come into play too. They just want to silence the majority. And let me remind you, friends, it is the majority that they are silencing through the minority. But you're exactly right.
All right, now part of your presentation on campus is the Christian history of the United States. Anywhere in your findings and deliberation have you seen where our founding fathers said we should have a National Department of Education?
No, but as a matter of fact, I do have something right in front of me. We used to have something called the English primer, Terry.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when the way they taught the kids during the Revolution and after the Revolutionary War in the United States of America, and as well as McGuffey, it's interesting that they taught the children the ABCs using scripture. For example, in Adam's fall, we sinned all. That's teaching the children the alphabet. B is heaven defined the Bible mind. I can go all the way down the alphabet to the very end. To Z, Zacchaeus did climb the tree, our Lord to see. How far we have fallen away from who we are. As a matter of fact, if I can bring up a founding forefather, his name was Benjamin Rush. He was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. And he's the guy that said the only foundation for a useful education in a republic, we are a constitutional republic, is to be laid in religion under the umbrella of the Christian faith. He said, without there can be no virtue, and without virtue there can be no liberty, and liberty is the object and life of all Republican governments. So here we are.
All right. Back to the 10th Amendment. How does that provide for you the opportunity to call for the abolishment of the Department of Education?
Well, you know, when you're saying that, first of all, Perry, I think when they write those headlines, because I didn't write that headline, they kind of got me in a pickle a little bit, didn't they?
Yeah.
But really, it's just bringing forth the experience that I have in the schools that I've done to just say, hey, folks, I'm trying to figure out the hypocrisy here. I'm saying if you want to bring an end to what's going on in federal government and what they're doing with your children in public schools, then simply pull them out of the schools. I mean, my remedy for what's going on here in the first place, Perry, as you know, is to teach kids the price paid for their freedoms, because once they understand the price paid for their freedoms, they're going to go and do their homework, and they're going to find out exactly what George Washington said and what he meant when he said religion and morality are the essential pillars of civil society. They want to know the Bible, the Word of God, and they want to know the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights.
Do you think we could ever get back into our system, Galatians 5, where Paul was talking there that it's meant for every man to be free, and that actually became the basis of liberty and freedom in the United States?
Well, Charles D. Montesquieu, one of the three famous signers of our foundation, along with William Blackstone and along with John Locke, he was the guy that said liberty is the right to do what the law permits. And we can see what's going on in this country, that we have, well, let me say it this way, we have a president that claims it's Christianity, but we see that everything he does is contrary to what he says. He does everything the opposite as to what he says. So I'm trying to, and Jesus is the one that taught us, Perry, to judge a man by his fruit, not by what he says. Because if you remember right, Jesus said, you honor me with your lips, but your hearts are far from me. We just need to get back to the fact that we only have liberty within the confines of our constitutional republic and not outside of that.
All right, let's go back to some of these core education terms that now are being looked at more clearly and certainly more critically. No Child Left Behind, your take on that?
Well, they're shooting for the floor. They're trying to level the playing field. Nobody's better than anybody else. Again, when I'm across the country and I'm talking about the very topic, I say in the public school system, I say it's not No Child Left Behind. It should be rightly called No Child Left Unindoctrinated. And that's really what it comes down to, because, again, it's un-American stuff. It's just a slow progression to dummy down our students. And there's really nothing more to say. Even when we go to Common Core, to try to explain Common Core, you can. It's confusion. And that's exactly what it's aimed at doing, is confusing the next generation.
Common Core, we're hearing more about it. And again, it is confusing. I have no idea what it is. All the red flags go off. But on the other hand, it seems to be going through every legislative committee in the country and working its way to becoming the norm.
Well, if you want to dummy down a nation, that's how you do it. When you dummy down a nation, then you can control that people. And that's exactly what we're seeing happen through our country today. I mean, for example, let me just bring this to simple terms, common knowledge terms with the students. I'll ask the students if we're a republic or we are a democracy. You know what the students believe we are? They believe that we're a democracy, when in fact we're a republic. If they would read the Constitution, Article 4, Section 4, they would clearly see that we've been given a Republican form of government. But when we begin to ask the kids to recite back the Pledge of Allegiance, which they are now attacking, by the way, friends, once they say the Pledge of Allegiance, they can see clearly that we are a republic, and they find out their own error within that. And it's interesting, again, going back to the President of the United States, we have a constitutional scholar there, Perry, and it's interesting that he's inundating the younger generation, namely the college students, with the fact that we're a democracy, when in fact we're not a democracy whatsoever. Just a simple way of explaining it.
What's been the reaction to your call?
Well, I've been doing report after report. I've been doing interview after interview all over the country. People are awake, but again, I think what happens is, again, let me bring it to reality for you again.
Sure.
I did a high school assembly in Pensacola, Florida. There's 5 churches around this particular school, and as I'm inside of this school, these students are trying to figure out why their parents love them so much and their pastors love them so much, yet they get to see their parents how many hours out of the day, and their pastors once a week, maybe twice a week, and they're trying to figure out where the love is when they're, in fact, they're the ones that are being thrown into the cesspool of indoctrination. They're just looking for someone to love them enough, Perry, to stand up and fight for them.
All right, when they hear your message, and I know you've said this before, there is a tremendous reaction, because the scripture says when you know the truth, it'll set you free. And when you get done with your rallies, you see a lot of kids that are set free. What's been the residual effect of that?
Well, when you look at the students, I've had responses from, as a matter of fact, one of the first high school assemblies I did 14 years ago, Centennial in Lino Lakes. It was a youth pastor's kid that came up to me, and he fought me tooth and nail. He said, "You're crossing lines between church and state. You can't do that in a public school." And mind you, once I'm done with the high school assembly, I am inundated with students. I have 25 to 50 to 75 to 100 students gathered around me because they want someone to listen to them. But this particular youth pastor just fought me. I said, "Listen, bro, let's go out to Perkins. Let's have some coffee." We sat down at Perkins. About a year and a half, 2 years later, I get an email from that young man that fell away from God.
Oh, wow.
That's serving the Lord wholeheartedly. He's now a youth pastor serving God the way he's never served God before, because he said he's seen through the hypocrisy. He said when he sat down with me, Perry, he said, "It wasn't anything you said, Bradlee. It was just the presence of God." And you know what? That's good enough for me.
Yeah, that's for sure. You know, Bradlee, what's so interesting about this is that these kids today have so much pressure on them, and they are coming out almost hopeless. I mean, it's epidemic. You look into their eyes and they don't live for a future. They just think like, if I can just get through till midnight, it's been a good day.
Yep, and they have teachers that are willing to help them pass through without even passing the test. You're exactly right. And Arturia said this. He said, there's no worse death than the end of hope. And you're hitting some chords here with me, my friend.
That's okay. That's fine.
5,000 out of every 500,000 students will commit suicide.
Yeah.
And we see this. It's a sad day in America when we do a high school assembly and we find out that a student killed himself the week before. Boy, I'm not like this, Perry. I'm sorry. I'm just breaking it this morning.
No. This is I'm just glad that you're being so transparent with this, Bradlee, because parents need to hear this. Pastors need to hear this. We're sending these kids into here. And the hard part for me is that I know there are teachers and administrators trying hard, but they just don't seem to be getting anywhere. And it's a war zone for the soul of these kids.
Yeah. If I can just go back and finish my point about suicide. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Kids today need to understand that life is hard, it is uphill, it is not easy, and it is not downhill. You have to show them the cross. And again, let me bring it back to my natural analogy that I use in public schools across this country. You have to show them the price paid for their freedoms. And when you equate it to their family members that have served in foreign wars to fight, bleed, and die to ratify the Constitution of the United States, you're bringing that hope to them because you're showing them the price paid for the freedoms that they have. And once you show them the price, they don't want to do anything, Perry, to violate or to desecrate or to show any disrespect to the price of or for the price of the sacrifice that was paid on the behalf of them to have the freedoms in which they have.
Wow, that's just beautiful. Let me take a break here, Bradlee. We're right back, and I want you to tell us who was William McCuffey, okay?
You got it.
All right, we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Okay, we're back with Bradlee Dean, and we're talking about, the Department of Education and the educational system in the United States. And, of course, Bradlee is on a lot of these campuses with rallies and giving the Christian history of the United States and really some history about war and the cost and the price of freedom. And our conversation today is just very, very special. And by the way, if you have Roku and you get the Dove channel, you may want to share this interview with family members and friends across the country, because it's now nationwide, and you can share that through Roku, or actually go to thedove.us and pull up this segment and again send it to your family and friends and let them hear what Bradlee has to say. Bradlee, who was William McCuffey, and why is his life so significant in this argument?
He was a schoolmaster to the nation. He was a really smart guy. I got some items and actually some doctrine that he taught our students in public schools during the foundation of our country. As a matter of fact, in his school books, the number one thing he taught children in public schools, might I add, is the character of Jesus Christ. Number two, the golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Number three, extract from the sermons on the Mount, Sermon on the Mount, Solomon's wise choices. Number four. Number five, the goodness of God. Number six, gospel invitation. Number seven, Christian light and hope. Number eight, awake to Zion. And number nine, on prayer. That's what used to be taught in public schools in this country. We know all the way up until 1946, David Barton with Wall Builders has got some books out there where you actually have to see the curriculums that students had to pass before they could graduate in 1946 in Texas. And we as well know that you could pray all the way up until 1962. And by the way, you still can.
Yes. Yesterday I had Doug Birdsall on. He's the president of the American Bible Society, and he quoted an interesting statistic that he partnered with on Barna to find out that over 70% of Americans want the Bible back in public school.
Oh, easy. I don't think there's any question about it. I mean, prevention is better than cure. And what we need to do, instead of sending our kids into the correctional facility or the judicial system to receive a Bible after they commit the crime, why don't we give it to them before they even think about committing the crime? You're exactly right.
So how do we penetrate this wall? We don't seem to get anywhere with this issue.
I got to go back to what I told you from the very beginning. The church's pearl, the pearl to the church in the United States is Christ crucified. The pearl in the natural is showing the young people the price paid for their liberties. And if I can, Perry, just kind of give you a little outline as to how I take it through in public schools once again.
Sure, go for it.
When I do high school assemblies, what I'll do is I'll ask the students if they know the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, or the Declaration of Independence. And the students, without fail, will look at me and laugh at me. And there can be a population of up to 1,800 students, all the way down to 50 students per high school that we do. And when they start to laugh at me, I'll say to them, what's so funny? If you don't know your rights, you don't have any rights. And all of a sudden, I'll ask them the next question. So how many of you in this room have moms, dads, grandpas, grandmas, perhaps, brothers or sisters, cousins that have served in foreign wars to preserve the freedoms that we now have in this country, and you don't even know what they fought, bled, and died to give us? All of a sudden, for 2.5 hours, I have a group of students, a body populace of students and teacher faculty, where I could literally drop a pin. They're like a bunch of deer looking in a headlight because nobody's ever told them that or equated that to themselves before. I'll begin to bring them down the path of the price paid concerning World War I. I'll tell them 116,516 men fought, bled, and died to ratify the Constitution of the United States that you don't even know. Then I'll tell them World War II, 405,399 men, women fought, bled, and died to ratify the Constitution of the United States that you don't know. As a matter of fact, guys, you thought it was funny that you didn't know. And then I'll also share with them that during World War II, there wasn't a household in America that did not feel loss. Next, I'll bring them over to Korea. 36,516 men and women fought, bled, and died to ratify the Constitution. Iwo Jima. I'll bring them to Vietnam. My cousin was killed in Vietnam. 58,151 men were killed there. I'll bring them to the present, Iraq and Afghanistan. And then I'll begin to share with them a story where I did a high school assembly, Perry, in Guthrie, Iowa. And there was an older man there. And as I sat down, I walked up to him, and I just had an unction that he was in World War II. And I said to him, sir, we're in World War II. And he said, yes, I was, son. And I thought that was cool. So I sat down with him. And when I sat down with him, I said, can you convey to me the price paid, or can you tell me your experiences in World War II? He said, well, Bradlee, he said, when I got over to Germany, there was a company of 50. And he said, me and 3 of my buddies left in a mortar tank. He said, we got hit with a mortar. He said, it killed all 3 of my buddies right in front of me. He said, when I got back to the company of 50, Perry, he said they were all gone. And then this older man did this, Perry. He put his hand over his face, and he started to shake like this. And he said, Bradlee, you just get me today, man. He said, Bradlee, you just have to put it out of your mind. And I'll look at the students and I'll say to them, there is nothing that you can do to put that out of my mind. And then what I do is I show them, and I ask the students, I'll show them Arlington Cemetery. I'll show them a big picture of all the crosses, the Christian crosses over the heads of those boys and those girls that paid the ultimate price for our freedoms. And then I'll ask them, Perry, I'll say, now, which one of you guys in this room would think it'd be a good idea? Because it's not a big deal that, that we don't know our founding documents. What would you think of me if I said, let's take a can of spray paint and desecrate their headstones? Wow. Let's party it away, guys. No big deal. And all of a sudden, without fail, either in front of everybody or behind closed doors, one of the students will say, if you do that, Bradlee, I'll rip your head off. And see, now what you have is you have converted students that understand the price paid. And once they understand the price paid, they will let nobody desecrate their sacrifice in any sense of the word. And guess what they want to know then? They want to know their foundations. And if they know their foundations and they know where they came from, then they're going to know their future. They want to know the Constitution and the Bible.
Wow. Let me just share quickly with you, within the last week or two, I had a veteran who fought in Normandy, and I had a veteran from the Korean conflict. And I asked both of them this question separately, and the response was the same. The question I ask is the country you fought for the same today? Mm-hmm. And they both began to weep and couldn't answer the question.
That's right. Every time, Perry. And when you talk to these guys, you shake their hands. They immediately water up. They want to tell their stories. I'll tell the students and the teachers before the end of the high school assembly, do me a favor, call them up and tell me that I'm lying. Call them up and tell them thank you so much for their service, but don't offer your lip service. Live for what they fought, bled, and died for. As a matter of fact, that was George Washington's motto, was deeds, not words, and he derived that from 1 John 3:18, when Jesus said, "My little children, let us not love in word, neither in tongue, but by deed and truth."
From your experience, Bradlee, how is war conveyed, the history of war conveyed in public school today? I mean, is any of this brought out at this level?
No, this is what they're hiding from our generation. If you remember back in 2004, when Iraq, that war started up, do you remember, right? The media was told that they could no longer take pictures of the soldiers coming back in boxes because they didn't want the American people to see the price paid. They didn't want them to realize that it was their boys and girls that were actually doing the fighting for those wars. And you got to keep in mind, in the book of Hosea 8, there's the Lord's wars and there's man's wars. And I think it's important for people just to understand the price, because we know those young soldiers are simply upholding the Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. They're not doing anything wrong. And to just kind of make the distinction as to what I'm trying to say here, if people complain about the wars that our children are sent to and the young people are sent to, then stop it in Congress before they're sent. And I think that's what's important for people to know. But back to your point, again, they want to understand the price paid, and there's nothing like it, because once you bring that in, it's all over for the enemy, because they will read their documents, and you're not going to have to do it by a show of force in any sense of the word.
Well, you know, we sanitized 9/11. We never did show any of the people jumping out of the buildings or the bodies being removed from ground zero. So how is 9/11 being conveyed in public school? What happened really?
It's not even talked about. As a matter of fact, if you remember right after 9/11, remember people that actually seen the planes hit the towers? Right. They said it was surreal. It was like it wasn't even happening. Well, that's the younger generation as well. I mean, we have an entitlement generation now that believes everything should be given over to them. But going back to your point again, I don't even think it's even talked about. I haven't heard it talked about. I did a high school assembly in Sandstone, Minnesota on September 11th. That, as a matter of fact, the day the towers hit, I was doing a high school assembly.
You know, what's so interesting here is part of the things we're fighting is the younger generation seems to have lost the value of human life. I mean, we see it not only in the abortion figures, but we're seeing it in these games. You can shoot somebody on a game and they'll get up and run away. They think that suicide somehow just moves them to another room. They have lost the value of human life. After they hear your presentation, then I would assume all of a sudden they hear the meaning of life for the first time.
Absolutely. Students will say, AJ from Florida, I'll never forget this young kid in Florida, Clewiston, Florida, said to me, he said, Bradlee, when you were talking, it was like a light went on. And he goes, I needed that light to come on. If you'd like to see some of these referrals, it's really better for people to read what they said rather than me say it about myself, because I'm not trying to dump accolades on myself. But if you'd like to go to youcanruninternational.com, youcanruninternational.com, you can see all the referrals from students up to superintendents to principals to teachers.
All right. So how are you going to get this movement going to call for the abolishment of the Department of Education? Because I think a lot of people are with you on this.
Oh, I think they are too. I think the mass exodus that needs to take place in the country is the system would fall in a day of people in this country that were complaining about this administration and its unlawful tactics. If they were to pull their kids, it would be all over for them. They would have no option then, and I'm talking about federal government, than to right the wrongs and get their hands where they don't belong, out of the system, and that's where they need to be.
You're an inspiration, friend.
Thank you. Thank you, Perry. You really got me today, too. I appreciate that. The Holy Ghost dropping on you is always a good thing, right?
Well, you know, that's how it works. And Sons of Liberty Radio. And again, that website to check out more?
YouCanRunInternational.com. YouCanRunInternational.com. As you can see behind me, Jake actually told me, Perry, to move the camera a little bit so they can see SonsOfLibertyRadio.com, SonsOfLibertyRadio.com. We're on 6 days a week as well.
All right. God bless you. Love you, my friend. Have you back soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Perry.
All right. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.